Tēnā koutou kei ngā mana nau mai whakatau mai anō kia Tapatahi. Kia ora and welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us. Well, coming up on the program, we talk to academic Rawiri Taonui about his COVID-19 research and whether we're rushing the move to alert level 2. Has the government got it right when it comes to tangihanga? Tikanga expert Che Wilson says no. New Zealand Rugby is feeling the effects of COVID-19 with layoffs and lost revenue. What does this mean for the game? And services for victims of family violence and sexual violence get a pre-budget boost of $200 million. The Māori Principals Association resurrects its campaign for a new Māori education system, and the Iwi Chairs Forum want to know what your vision is for a post-pandemic Aotearoa. But first, here's Pōtaka Maipi with the news.
Tēnā koe Shane, kei aku pare huri no I te motu a ta Māori. Hei te taite a Aotearoa ka heke ki te taumata ohiti tuarua e whakatau I puta I te kāhui minita ka mutu I whakapuakitia e te premia I na nahi nei.
Parties, big social events or anything designed to be for mixing and mingling won't be allowed to happen for groups that are larger than 10. Gatherings at home need to be kept at 10. Church and religious events, weddings, funerals, stag do's, all limited to 10 for now.
Hoi ko te pātai kei ngā ngutu o te iwi, ko te wahanga ki ngā tangihana, ka noho tonu ki raro I te tikanga o te tua ngāhuru tangata.
We did really give hard consideration to this, particularly because we have been so moved by the struggle for families with funerals and tangi. But people come together for funerals and tangi to physically comfort one another. And so this is an area where we are hoping to be able to move soon, but for now we've opted for the safety of 10 and the consistency of 10.
E tū tohe ana tētahi hapu no roto mai o Waikato I te whanaketanga noho kāinga I ngā rua wāhia. Hei tā Ngāti Tama Unupo, kaore rātau I whakamohiotia e Bradley Development Limited ki ngā mahi huke I te whenua I timata ake rā I mua I te mahi I te rahui kei a Regan Paranihi te ruangake.
I take a mai te inga o te taone o ngā rua wāhia I ngā rua kai o te pā upuke āhua. He take anō auarua I roto I ngā mahi hanga whare a Bradley Development Limited.
There are 140 or more burrow pits that are associated with puke āhua. And of those 140 or more, there are only 6 or 7 remaining, which just happens to be on the site behind.
Ko te reo tērā o KIMAI HUIRAMA. E whakahaua ana a ngai Māori kia ako mo te tiaki tō rātou mana iho matua, ko te mana tārua me te takahi ahurea he raru iwi take puta no I te ao, a ko Māori hoki te papa.
Our intellectual property framework requires that there be an intellectual property right that's infringed, and so therefore you can then sue for infringement. And until you have that scenario, it's really difficult to sue somebody or to take appropriate legal action.
Huria ki ana ki te kapahaka e rika ana ngā kaihaka I te tai tokerau kia hoki anō ki ngā mahi haratau, ka heke anō te motu ki te taumata ohiti tuarua. Ko te whakataitai kapahaka arohe o te tai tokerau tētahi o ngā hui I whakatārewatia nā te mate urutā. Hoi kua timata ngā kai whakahaere ki te whakarite I te whakataitai.
Kia whai wā anō ngā kapa, te āhua tērā pia tīnihia, ngā kaipapa, ngā momo pito kōrero, me ngā kupu kei roto I a rātou nā waiata.
I te mutu e takatū ana kia heke ki te taumata ohiti tuarua, kua ki ake a whutupōro Aotearoa, ka rewa te tōna mana Super Rugby hei te kaumātoru o hune. Ko ngā Chiefs ka haere ki o te poti, ki reira pakanga ai ki ngā Highlanders, I te rā whai muri iho, ka whakamanuhiri ngā Blues, I ngā Hurricanes ki tā maki makaurau, a koe o hoki tā Bowden Barrett, tuki ngā tuatahi, ma tāna kapa hō. Ka tahi anō ka puta te kōrero, ka rewa te whakataitai Mitre 10 Cup a te kaumātahi o hepetema, kaore anō kia puta ngā whakaritenga mo te FARAH Cup me ngā tukinga a ngā mamaku. Kāti, koira ngā kōrero mo te uhupoko o tēnei haora, me hoki kia Tapatahi.
Ka pai. Tēnā no tātou katoa. Tikanga expert Che Wilson is disappointed the government hasn't listened to advice that would have seen up to 100 people being allowed to attend tangihanga under Alert Level 2. All gatherings, including tangi and weddings, will be limited to 10 people. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the 10-person limit was given hard consideration in light of the difficulties people have had with tangi, but it was a balanced decision taking safety into account. Che Wilson joins us now. Tēnā rau atu koe, Che.
Tēnā koe, Shane. Tēnā koutou.
Why do you disagree with the government's decision?
I think the messaging is the problem. There is mixed messaging where people are allowed to go to school, people are allowed to go to malls, and if you look at what happens at supermarkets, I was the key shopper during Level 4, and people were really respectful of social distancing, but since we've dropped, it's been terrible. People break the 1 metre distance, there's less wearing of gloves and masks, and I think a really good solution could have been done where people could have been wearing masks, gloves, and having the contact maintained, contact details gathered to ensure that people can mourn in an appropriate way.
Just to clarify your role with tangihanga guidelines, can you just clarify the advice or the role that you've played in providing advice to the Ministry of Health on this particular kaupapa?
Yeah, so initially I developed some guidelines which I sent out to iwi around the country and also got sent out to Māori organisations around the country because nothing was coming out. And so I did that, and as a result of that, the ministry contacted me. They've contacted others as well, and so have been supporting the ministry on a voluntary basis to make sure that tikanga is considered in a thorough way, so that we can work with the officials rather than being told this is it and not know who's advising them. So there's a number of us that got involved to support this kaupapa, and it's really difficult that we're informed that one decision will be made and we get told at the same time as everyone else that another decision.
So can you tell us what your advice was to the government with the shift to Level 2 for tangi?
So none of us made any comments because they had already put in the advice that it would be 100 people inside, 500 outside. And then after all of the feedback, that was changed just to 100 inside and outside. And as a result of that, we thought, that's fine. We've got to work through everything. And so assumed that it would be 100.
So just to be clear, you thought, quite rightly so, because the Prime Minister made it very clear, right, last week, that under Alert Level 2, gatherings indoor and outdoor, you could allow for up to 100 people. And so you naturally assumed that that would apply to tangi as well. Is that correct?
Well, that's what was in the advice. That was in the advice that was sent back to us to say, here's the final advice. And that didn't happen. And I think the key thing is that we've got to work through a process, and my key advice was around please develop some advice to help guide our people. And I'm not just talking about Māori, but our nation.
Let's reflect on the Prime Minister's explanation of the decision to restrict it to up to 10 people. Now, she said that Cabinet thought long and hard about the decision because they know the impact that the current guidelines have had on Māori and non-Māori when it comes to tangi and funerals. But she says, people come together at a time of tangi to comfort one another, which would mean, if we read between the lines, that there would be a lot more physical contact. That was their main concern, which is why they've stuck with 10 people. Do you not agree with that rationale?
I think if you can give good, clear advice, other than those that are in their bubble, I know that there have been tangi where people haven't hugged each other, they've turned up and have watched from a distance and have respected that, but other than the bubble, they've respected the rules. And the more that you can promote that, the more that you work with community leaders, church leaders, the poor old funeral directors who are struggling at the moment, the more that people will find a reason to listen and abide by the rules. When you give inconsistent messaging, especially knowing the way people have been behaving in supermarkets and, malls, it's hard to know whether they'll obey the rules at the malls. And young kids going back to school who will want to hug each other, it's going to be difficult.
So are you saying that actually Māori can be responsible, Māori can adhere to health and safety measures, and it should have been allowed to up to 100 people for tangi? Is that what you're saying? Because it seems as though the message we're getting is that the current restriction or the proposed restriction for level 2 is a bit paternalistic, and actually there's no trust there on us to be able to follow these guidelines.
It's extremely paternalistic, and of course we can be trusted. Tangi are the most hygienic time when you come together, because you're washing your hands all the time. And other than embracing each other, I think people have learnt that this disease kills, and they're mindful and therefore have been maintaining the rules. And actually Māori have been really great. Yeah, there's the odd occasion that people will not listen to rules, but that's not a Māori issue, that's a human issue.
The Prime Minister says we will be, or they will be indeed, reviewing this decision within 2 weeks' time. We know, and we've heard the stories of how the tangi guidelines have significantly impacted and affected our whānau. What do you think, by extending this for another 2 weeks, what effect do you think this is going to have on whānau who lose a loved one?
Well, based on the feedback that I've had overnight, is people are extremely frustrated, and the whole nation was hurting. But even you look at the religious community, the feedback that they're giving, they're upset that you're allowed to go to the pub, but you can't go to church. And so it's very paternalistic that funerals and religious gatherings aren't allowed, but you're allowed to go to the pub. And that's the biggest challenge.
Che Wilson, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We do really appreciate your time. Ka nui rā te mihi ki a koe.
Tēnā koe.
Well, as we said, we're looking at a phased move into Alert Level 2. Retail, malls, cafes, restaurants, cinemas and other public spaces, including playgrounds and gyms, will be able to reopen on Thursday. Schools will return to normal classes next Monday, and bars will reopen the following Thursday with conditions around spacing and wait staff. Groupings will be restricted to just 10 people. This applies to parties, church meetings, weddings, tangi and group bookings at restaurants. But are we throwing caution to the winds? Dr. Rawiri Taonui has been crunching the numbers, excuse me, and joins us now. Tēnā koe, Rawiri.
Morena, Shane.
You don't believe we should be at level 2, or indeed moving to level 2 this week. Why is that?
Well, I think the government's made its decision based on a number of macro figures, and those figures do tend to support a gradual move to level 2. However, when you delve a little bit deeper, the numbers don't stack up, and the likelihood of there being further new cases and a further outbreak is almost certain.
Can you explain what you mean by the numbers don't stack up, and then also share the evidence that you have that would suggest that another outbreak is going to occur?
Yeah, sure, Shane. I mean, as we all know, we've been seeing only single-figure cases for for some time now, more than 2 weeks. So when you're trying to balance the welfare of people with the need to get the economy going, during level 4, level 4 cost the economy about $5 billion a week. During level 3, it was about $2.5 billion a week. And then when you've only got single figure cases, that does lend itself to a decision with more confidence in contact tracing, reinforced capacity to manage cases, then maybe we should come down from level 3. A couple of the other things that stand out, there are 8 DHBs that have have zero active cases in their area, and they're about 2/3, 13 or 14 DHBs haven't reported any new cases for over 2 weeks. However, when you look at that a bit deeper, what you find is that the DHBs that have zero active cases are also the DHBs that have under-tested Māori, Pacifica and Asian. So 6 of those 8, the figures for testing for Māori, Pacific and Asian communities is well below the national average. And then when you have a look at the DHBs that haven't reported cases for several weeks, you see the same picture. And overall, if we look at testing, 11 DHBs, the testing has been below average for Māori. 11 DHBs, the testing has been below average for Pacifica communities. And in all 20 DHBs, and by quite a significant margin, on average more than 40%, testing has been below average for Asian communities.
So can I just break this down? First of all, you talk about the economics behind this, and sitting at level 3 is costing the country a lot of money. We get that, right? We understand that.
Yes.
The next point that you make is that the numbers around testing and the decline to the point where we saw over 2 consecutive days, no reported positive cases. That data you're suggesting has helped influence the government's decision by virtue of a decline or seeing a decline. That's helped influence their decision to move to alert level 2. But what you're saying or suggesting is that data that they've based that decision on is not accurate. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's definitely the case. And one of the ones that stands out in particular, Shane, if we look overseas, some of the states in America, in Australia, Northern Territory, Victoria, Western Australia, South Australia, they've gone a week or more on 0 new cases before they've started opening up. Now, when you look at our low numbers, we're still only seeing between, say, 1 and 4 a day. But if we look at how long it's been since DHBs have reported cases, 4 of our largest 5 DHBs it's only 1 day ago at max. So yesterday there were actually, officially there's 3 new cases, but in fact there were 4. Waitapata, Auckland, Waikato. Now they're our biggest DHBs and they're still reporting cases. So what is almost certain to happen is that there are going to be new cases in those large urban DHBs. And
well,
Shane
I do want
was
to come
talking
to.
about.
Sorry to interrupt you,
Sure.
Rawiri, but we our time is limited this morning, and I really want to get to the bottom of this. Let's go back to your claim, though, that you are certain that, or at least based on your research and the evidence that you can see, there's going to be another outbreak and we're going to see an increase in positive cases. What can you point to that supports that theory?
4 of our largest 5 DHBs have reported new cases either yesterday or the day before, with less social distancing, more interregional travel. there's a high chance of new cases in the large urban DHBs, and there's a risk to Māori, not only in places like Auckland, but through low social distancing and interregional travel, that gets into the regions. Now, we've done a really, really good job with the checkpoints keeping COVID out of the regions. Te Tairawhiti has gone, it's got the lowest per capita infections in the country, but there's a real risk of new cases in large urban DHBs and transfer into the regions.
I'm being told to wrap this up, but I want to ask this question because it's burning at the moment. Doesn't all this come back to personal responsibility and us following health and safety measures that are in place? Adhering to social distancing, washing our hands, keeping ourselves protected and safe. If we follow those guidelines, we won't see a new outbreak. Isn't that the case?
Well, I think...
Or am I being too simplistic?
That probably is a bit simplistic. Māori communities have been very good at adhering to social distancing, washing their hands, looking after old people. What's going to happen is that it's certain there'll be new cases in the big centres. Listen, you line up for a plane ticket to fly from Auckland to one of the regional centres. You'll be maintaining 2 metres distance. 50 or 60 people sit down on a plane, you won't. It's as
Rawiri
simple as
Taonui,
that.
thank you for your time this morning. We do really appreciate it. And
Thanks,
of course,
Shane.
we will have you on the program again and we'll monitor the data as it's released over the next few weeks. Tēnā rawa atu koe.
Ai ka mihi.
Well, we'd love to know your thoughts on today's program. Please post your feedback on our Facebook page or send us an email, tapatahi@maoritelevision.com. Coming up after the break, services for victims of family violence and sexual violence get a pre-budget boost of $200 million. New Zealand Rugby is feeling the effects of COVID-19 with layoffs and lost revenue. What does this mean for the game? Kia ora and welcome back. The government will increase funding for services supporting victims of family violence, sexual violence and strangulation by nearly $203 million as part of this week's budget. $183 million will go towards support services for victims of family violence, elder abuse and prevention services. Some of the funding will go to support Māori-led and for Māori services. The remaining $20 million will go towards specialist health, mental health, forensic services and access to the legal system for surviving strangulation victims. Associate Minister of Social Development, Poto Williams, joins us now from Christchurch. Tēnā koe, Minister.
Yeah, tēnā koe, Shane. Kia ora.
How much of the funding will go to Māori-led services?
Currently, we fund through social development. About 30% of our budget goes to iwi or kaupapa services, but we are well aware that access by Māori is higher than that, so there are Māori also in mainstream services. But currently about 30% goes to iwi and kaupapa services.
Why do we need this extra funding?
Well, Shane, it's a build from our wellbeing budget. We always knew that funding into the sector was not adequate. It has been a sector under stress for some time now. The wellbeing budget gave the sector a well-needed boost, but at that time we made commitments to ensure that we could fund the sector much more appropriately in terms of the experiences that our people have. This is a budget for cost pressure, so it does relieve some of the pressure, but it is not the last piece in the puzzle. There is much, much more that we can be doing and will be doing into the future. It allows for those services to have much more adequate funding. But remember, Shane, this is pre-COVID cost pressures as well. So we know that with the experiences that our whānau are having at this difficult time, that there is much more work that we need to do, and in the very short term. You may know that the National Collective of Independent Women's Refuge has said there's about a 35% increase from last year during this lockdown period. So we know we have more to do.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I wanted to ask you about this. If this is based on pre-COVID-19, and we understand, as you've just said, there has been an increase of 35% during COVID-19 and lockdown, will we be seeing an extra 35% on Thursday?
Well, I'll leave budget announcements to the Minister of Finance, but just so that you're aware, we are aware. We've been in very close contact with our advisors from the National Collective and other organisations who are on the ground, but also researching overseas as well. The experiences overseas are very much informing what we do. What I have to say, Shane, is that as we move from level 3 to level 2 and restrictions on movements are lifted, we expect to become much more aware of the types of pressures that families have been under but haven't been able to express them because they, have been under lockdown and in households often where it's very difficult to be able to make contact with services. So we'll have a much fuller picture once we move into level 2 of the situations that we have to manage.
Can I just say, in the spirit of your comments in the press release that was issued yesterday around this budget announcement, we almost need to expect additional funding on Thursday because the gap just continues to grow wider, does it not, if you don't have the necessary resource in place, given that this budget announcement is all about cost pressures and providing extra resource to meet the current need, that current need being pre-COVID-19. That need is now growing, so therefore the resource needs to grow too, does it not?
Oh, well, I'm not going to give too much away, Shane, but what I do want to say is that it's part of a joint venture that ministers from across a whole lot of ministries, ACC, children, corrections, police, have been working on developing strategies so that we are able to move from these crisis situations much more fulsomely into early intervention and prevention. And that's the key to this. Yes, we must acknowledge the crisis that's in front of us, but as a government, we actually must also be putting in the building blocks that move us from always dealing with crisis to having processes and programs in place that support our whānau and our families to be resilient, to actually have much better connections and to support each other through some difficult times. So, one of the pieces of the cost pressure budget is to support people who use violence, to be able to be the circuit breaker that when they are getting elevated, when things are becoming problematic for them, that they've got some mechanisms and some way of dealing with that. So before they use violence, they've got an opportunity to break that circuit. Those are the kinds of initiatives that we must be doing more and more. But I must acknowledge, we are in we are dealing with crisis, and it's very difficult to ignore the distress of our whānau at this time.
Poto Williams, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We do appreciate your time. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora ana.
Well, New Zealand Rugby is laying off half its full-time staff and facing a loss of $120 million in revenue due to COVID-19. On the bright side, Super Rugby Aotearoa involving the Blues, Chiefs, Hurricanes, Crusaders and Highlanders will start on June 13, allowing players a month to prepare with contact training. What does this all mean for Māori and rugby? With me now is former Black Ferns captain and New Zealand Rugby Board member Dr. FARAH. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora.
So what does all of this mean?
Well, it's wonderful. I think everybody's been just chomping at the bit to get out and play rugby and to watch some rugby. So it's great that we can offer the professional side of the game to our people. They can get on Sky and watch that. And, we've got 30% of our players are Māori or Pacifica in terms of the player base, so it's great to have them out on the field as well.
We have a new name for Super Rugby. Why Aotearoa?
Because usually Super Rugby involves our SANZAR partners, but because of the border controls and you know, people are still going through different phases of responding to COVID-19, we felt that we've got great teams within Aotearoa, so why not call it Super Rugby Aotearoa, because we're involving all the New Zealand clubs in that competition.
Domestically, what are the challenges around getting players back into the game in terms of risk and logistics?
Well, we've had Karen Rasmussen, who's been leading our response from a health perspective at New Zealand Rugby, and she's done a great job in terms of working with the government to determine how we can make sure that this is safe and that our players and the people around them, the coaches and management, all keep themselves well. So there's a lot of things that we're doing in partnership with Sport New Zealand and the government to ensure the safety of everybody involved. And it'll mean empty stadiums for now.
Well, what does an empty stadium literally, well, we know what it literally means, but how is that going to impact the game? Great that we're going to see players and teams back on the field, but playing in an empty stadium, what sort of impact is that going to have on the game?
Oh, you know, I think everybody gets excited when the crowd gets excited, so it might have a little bit of an effect on their ihi and wihi, but hopefully they've got their inner drive to want to play. You know, I'm personally, as a woman who's played rugby, I'm quite used to stadiums that are not full. It would be great to see lots of people there for the Rugby World Cup 2021, which looks like it might be happening. So I think the players themselves are just excited to get out there. And we've also got thousands of supporters watching on television.
What does, given there's a lot of talk at the moment about us forming a trans-Tasman bubble, what does that mean for New Zealand Rugby?
Yeah, we're going to look at trying to get some kind of international games and competitions going. So we are talking to our neighbours across the Tasman to see if we can do something with them. So that might involve some kind of Super Rugby engagement there, or even international games as well for the All Blacks and potentially for the Black Ferns, who are preparing for the Rugby World Cup next year.
Can we talk briefly about grassroots rugby and school rugby? What are the plans in place for grassroots rugby and certainly for school rugby?
Yeah, I think we're still working through all of that with the government. You know, it's more manageable when you have a professional team where you've got the same people and they're under kind of strict guidelines as to not getting in touch with too many people outside their bubble. So I think that's easier to manage at the moment. We're still working through what we're going to do to get grassroots rugby up and running. You know, a lot of Māori rugby tournaments are at that level as well. So as the chair of the Māori Rugby Board, we're working with the government to see what we can do to get them back out on the field as well.
FARAH Palmer, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe. Kia ora.
And of course, we'd like to know what you think. Please let us know on our Facebook page or send us an email, tapatahi@maoritelevision.com. Kia huria ke tātou i nāne ki ngā tai pito pito o te wā.
Tēnā koe, Shane, mua tarau e te iwi. Hei te taite a Aotearoa ka heke ki te taumata ohiti tuarua. Kua wātea ngā wāhi hoko pērā i ngā mōro, ngā whare kiriata, ngā whare kuti makawe, ngā whare kai kia pure anō. Hei te rāhina timata mai anō ngā kura, a te rua te kaumātahi o tēnei marama, ka puare mai anō ngā pāpara kauta. Engari ka hiki te tukemata a te Māori ki ngā tikanga mō ngā tangihana, ka noho tonu ki te tua ngāhuru tangata. Toko toru atu ngā tangata kua pāngia e te mate uruta toko rua. He nehi no te whare tiaki kaumātu o St. Margaret's i Tāmaki Makaurau, ko tētahi atu he tangata i rere mai i tā wāhi, no reira ko tahi mano e whārau, iwa te kaumāwhitu te tōpūtanga tūroro. E tumanako ana te tāhuhu rangapu o te taura whiri i te reo Māori a ngā hiwi apanui ki ētahi pūtea apati i te whakapuakatanga tāhua pūtea i tēnei tau, mā te ko mihana e whakatinana te rautaki reo Māori a te kāwanatanga, hoi e hāhā ana te tāhua, hei te rāpare whāriki hea i te minita Grant Robinson, tana rautaki toha toha pūtea. E rika ana ngā kaihaka i te taitoke rau kia hoki anō ki ngā mahi haratau. Ka heke ana te motu ki te taumata ohiti tuarua, ko te whakataitai kapahaka rohe o te taitoke rau tētahi o ngā hui I whakatārewatia nā te mate uruta hoi, kua timata ngā kai whakahaere ki te whakarite I te whakataitai. Kāti, koe rā katoa ngā kaupapa matua mō tēnei wā, ka hoki anō ki a koe Shane.
Tēnā nō koe pōtaka. Well, distance learning during lockdown has highlighted inequities for many whānau during COVID-19. The education community has publicly voiced its concerns to the Epidemic Response Committee that it hasn't been impressed with the government's response to education. The New Zealand Māori Principals Association thinks a reset in Māori education is required now. With me now is the chairman, Miles Ferris. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Shane.
Why aren't you happy with the government's education response to COVID-19?
Well, I think in the first instance we're concerned about the number of our tamariki that we knew would not be able to engage online. We know of so many places around the country that don't have internet service, many of our tamariki don't have devices. I think one of the other issues is, of course, that, as an example, Chakatea New Zealand Māori Principals represent Māori principals across the country. Ourselves and New Zealand Pacifica weren't invited to the table in the first instance. So yeah, again, when we finally got into the room, we looked around the room and it was pretty white.
And that's a common story that we've heard on this program over the last few weeks, that those making decisions in response to COVID-19, there hasn't been a strong Māori voice, certainly from the outset. That may have increased or grown stronger over time, but it seems to have been the case for you.
Yeah, and I guess if you have a look at the Epidemic Response Subcommittee, that just highlighted quite clearly that we are, in this day and age when the pressure comes on, we're still an afterthought. And so we're still concerned about how we are treated and how we have been invited to the table, not only just to provide advice, but actually to make decisions. So we still have this issue around tino rangatiratanga and mana motuhake that we're having an issue with, where we still have things done to us rather than Māori making decisions for Māori in education.
So what would you have done differently if you had have been at the table and given the opportunity to contribute to the decision-making process?
It's hard to say. I mean, let me say quite clearly, there are good people in the room. We've known this for a while, and people who have an affinity for Māori and want Māori to succeed. That's not the issue. The issue is about the fact that, one, we weren't there in the first instance, and two, we weren't part of the decision-making process. Now, in terms of what would we have done more effectively, I think we would have emphasised more the need to get connections for our tamariki. Yep, devices are going out, but we're well aware that there are still plenty of places across the country that still haven't received their devices. I don't think they were necessarily targeted to the children who really required it. And the work that was done to provide internet service providers for our people has been very slow. And so we haven't had too many of our people connected. I think of places like Kaio, where I know that there were only at one of the colleges up there were only 4 whānau that were connected out of the 60, 70 odd whānau in the kura. And that's not good enough. It is a systemic problem that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed now, because we have so many of our tamariki that that effectively can't research after school. They can't do anything after school to enhance their learning. So it has highlighted the real iniquity in our system.
So we now have an opportunity, or indeed you and your organisation have an opportunity, right? As schools reopen for Monday next week, and the ministry and other stakeholders come together to understand what the future may look like for our tamariki and for kura, What is your advice? And I'm sure you're going to be wanting to be again at that decision-making table, but how do you reset the system? How do you reset the lay of the land to ensure there is a better future for our tamariki and kura?
Well, I think what you're touching on, Shane, is the fact that we don't want to go back to a system pre-COVID-19. It wasn't working for us. In saying that, the ministry and this government have been very, very proactive in helping to, inviting Māori to the table to try and come up with some better ideas moving forward. One of the things that we have been pushing, and this is part of a group called Rangai Māori, or it's groups representing level 1 full immersion across the country. We have asked the Minister to set a goal of 30% of Māori tamariki in full immersion level 1 Rangai Māori by 2032. Now that date might be pushed out because it's taken a wee while to get there. But what that will mean is an increase from approximately 7% in early childhood and compulsory sector through to the current, which is 30%. Our goal of 30%, sorry. That's going to need a huge amount of investment. It's going to need a systemic strategic plan in order to grow more kura and early childhood kohanga right across the country, so that every Māori child has equal and free access to Rangai Māori education right across the country. We know there are places right around the country where it's very difficult for our Māori whānau to get access to full immersion. We are also asking for the development of a Māori Education Authority. This is something that was mooted over 30 years ago in the Mototau Accord, where they have, we've been asking for a while that it is about mana motuhake. It's about Māori making decisions for Māori. The Pākehā system has been able to make those decisions for far too long, and we're still not getting the progress that we need. So our aim is that we will have Māori making those decisions, not just on policy, but also from a financial perspective as well, where we believe that we have a lot of the answers that can help our people. One of them being, of course, increasing the level of reo in all kura, and making sure that every kura right across the country, kura Māori, kura Pākehā, is teaching te reo me ona tikanga. And we believe that's the right of every child in Aotearoa, not just Māori children. But I think if we lift the game right across the board, we're going to have a far better result.
Miles Ferris, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We do appreciate your time, and we look forward to following the progress that your organisation makes with government. Tēnā rawa atu koe.
Tēnā koe, Shane. Ka kite.
Bars will be the last out of all businesses to reopen in level 2, and they can only open if they abide by the 3 S's: seated, separated and single server. Lulu's Bar and Eatery in Tapatahi is one of many preparing to reopen. Owners Louise and Keith Waho, they join us now. Tēnā kōrua, welcome to the program.
Tēnā koe.
First of all, are you happy with the government's announcement that was made yesterday afternoon? We are now moving to level 2. Are you happy with what's been outlined?
Look, it's a matter of getting there. It's been 6 weeks now since we closed down, and it's been hard.
It's been a roller coaster. It's a bit of, for us, we thrive on whanangatanga. We thrive in making this place as a place to reconnect as whānau, or making new relationships, as extending our bubble, if you want to call it that. So being able to just try and open just our food, our kai, and promote our kai and get it out there and bringing people together is a real challenge. But we have staff who are wanting and just dying to get back, get
Keith,
some normality.
How hard has it been?
Very hard. it's been a roller coaster, really, really hard.
Louise,
We've
sorry,
you
you
know,
carry on, Keith.
We've we're a family, we're a whānau, and we treat our staff the same way, so we feel their pain, and it's hard. We're trying to keep our heads above water. We're trying to give them something to go back to. That's the biggest or the hardest thing, is that we're trying to give 15 staff that we have to come back into something that they can at least have some security in, which is the hardest thing, and it's not hard. With Christchurch, we've been through 3 big events in the last 10 years, and every time it's been a recovery. But it's we'll get there, same as we have the last 2 times. We'll fight through it.
And you make an absolutely important point there, Keith. You have been through a lot, o Tautahi Christchurch, in the last 10 years. And we can only imagine the toll that COVID-19 has had on you, your business, your whānau, and on the city. Louise, talk to us about what you're doing now in preparation to reopen for level 2.
So we've pretty much done a look at the bar, and because we have quite a narrow bar, the capacity is 28 comfortable, but actually this is going to be cut down to at least half of that. So it's going to be smaller. It's going to be spaced out according to the rules. We're going to have probably more staff than we would normally have working the front, and right from the person just touching the plates. We will have a number of places where we'll have sanitisers. We'll be welcoming people with a big smile and with aroha and the sanitizer on the side to bring them through the door, so before we even seat them. So teaching us, we're having meetings, we're having conversations. The first thing is getting our staff to be able to be having that view of everything we touch. We need to make sure we're sanitised. We need to make sure our whānau are comfortable. We need to make sure that they don't get up and come to the bar like they would normally come to the bar, that we come to them. This is a number of things.
Do the additional restrictions, and for example, you mentioned that you are going to have more staff on site to be able to carry out and comply with the restrictions. How much of an impact does that place, or what impact will it have on your business? Because we get, right, you're now allowed to reopen your business. But how viable is it when there are so many restrictions in place and the additional cost that will be incurred to comply with the restrictions?
Yeah, the additional cost is there. We're probably one of the lucky places. We've got an awesome landlord and an awesome property manager that have been with us right through the whole journey, and they support us 100%. So, looking at other businesses, because we look around us and we try and help out, and we do, there's, this is just an additional cost that pushes it that little bit too far. If you're looking at money coming in versus money going out, any opening where we are now is a cost. It's not an income. We're only just trying to show that we're being resilient and we can do it. It's not a money-making exercise by any means at all. It's almost moral bringing, and trying to bring something back so that, at least everybody feels like it's back to normal, or some sort of normality. And again, it's it's just giving something that they can feel, connected, and there's more just them in their bubble. There's other people that actually care.
What does the future look like for your business?
It's day by day, week by week. In some ways, from our point of view, it would have been better for us to be in, level 4 until they went to level 1. You know, everything, you know, you can't, you know, we've been, as you said, you know, we've been through so much in Christchurch that we know that there is something on the other side and we just have to get there.
I think it's very fair to say that is potentially could break us, could completely shut us down, and what this looks like after we hit level 1. So as everyone's saying, we want to support our community. We want our community to support us, to try and keep afloat until we can find that medium again of being back to what we call normal, given the circumstances.
Louise and Keith, I do want to thank you for coming on the program and sharing your story with us. And I want to also acknowledge your strength and resilience as you continue to do your best to work through the really trying, challenging and unprecedented time that we're in. Our hearts are with you, and we really do wish you much success over the next coming days and weeks. So thank you again for joining us. We do appreciate your time. Tēnā kōrua.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Coming up after the break, what could a post-pandemic Aotearoa look like? Margaret Mutu has been tasked by the Iwi Chairs Forum to answer that very question and joins us after the break. A campaign has been launched by the Iwi Chairs Forum to gauge what a post-pandemic Aotearoa could look like. Professor Margaret Mutu says COVID-19 has provided an opportunity to reimagine the future of the country. Margaret Mutu joins us now. Tēnā rā atu koe.
Ai, tēnā rā koe.
It sounds like a great idea. Who are you targeting in this campaign and why?
Well, we're actually targeting the whole of the country. And this is because this work comes out of the work we've been doing on constitutional transformation for over a decade now, although the talk in the Māori world has been going on for over a century in this area. But Māori talked a great deal about constitutional transformation over the last decade. We'd like the rest of the country to come in on this as well.
How do we link COVID-19 to constitutional change?
What we have seen during this pandemic is a shift in the way things are done in respect of Māori communities, and it is a transformational shift where Māori did not wait to see what they should do. We had experience of particularly the 1918 pandemic, and we knew that if we didn't move fast to protect ourselves, then we would be the primary victims of this pandemic. And so we took charge. We exercised our mana and our tino rangatiratanga in respect of our whānau, our hapu and our iwi. We made our decisions for ourselves, and you know what? The sky did not fall in. Things went well. Māori communities have been looked after in a way that they have not been looked after for over a century. So that we were able to demonstrate that contrary to all the propaganda we hear from the government, Māori can make our own decisions for ourselves, and we can look after ourselves, provided we have the resources to do so.
What do you hope to achieve with the campaign, and what will happen with the information that you gather and collect?
So what we want to do is to get the country talking about the fact that we do need to change the constitutional makeup of the country. At the moment, the constitutional arrangements cater for a very small, exclusive lot, mainly for Pākehā males who are middle class or wealthy. And that needs to change. So it's not a constitutional change that's needed just for Māori. There are a lot of other people who are excluded. So we want people to think about what it is that they want to have in this country. And one of the examples that was given that, you know, just provides an example of the sort of thing we're looking for a vision for the country was a statement like, all whānau, communities and people will achieve their potential. Something as simple but as deep as that. Now, what we're hoping to do with this information is there is a Māori Constitutional Convention being organised for the end of this year. So that would be the first place we would take all the information to and say, look, this is what the country is saying. How are we going to lead this out from here?
Margaret Mutu, it's lovely to talk to you again. Thank you so much for your time and all the very best with the campaign.
Kia ora.
Well, that's our program today. Ka nui rā te mihi ki ngā waha kōrero I whai wāhi mai kia tapatahi kia tātou I tēnei ata. Koinā tapatahi mo tēnei rā kia piki te ora te kaha me te māramatanga kia koutou katoa noho ora mai.